Views expressed by Camaplan podcast guests may not reflect those of Camaplan. Camaplan does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by guests, nor does it endorse or recommend any individual or organization. Camaplan is not an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. You are encouraged to conduct your own due diligence before making investment choices. For any tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other questions, please consult a specialist. Hi, I'm Michael Duncan, and welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom. This podcast is brought to you by Camaplan, a self-directed IRA administrator focused on educating investors on how to grow retirement savings faster through alternative investments. In each episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the many roads taken to financial freedom and how they differ for each of our guests. Our goal is to help the listeners learn how they can achieve their own financial freedom through the experience and stories of experts that have done just that. Today's guest is the founder of Childfree Wealth, a life and financial planning firm dedicated to helping child-free and permanently childless people. He is a certified financial planner, Childfree Wealth Specialist, author of the book Portraits of Childfree Wealth, and also the co-host of the Childfree Wealth podcast. I'm very excited to welcome Jay Zigmont to the show. Jay, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. I have to say, when your email first came into my email box, I was very intrigued by just kind of the idea of the Childfree Wealth, and it made me click on it. I did some reading, and I'm very excited to learn more about that and more about how you approach all that today.
Yeah, it's one of those, there's very rare there's something new in finance, but it's an interesting new world, let's call it that, area of finance.
Absolutely. So I would love to actually just kind of start at the beginning and start kind of how you got into all of this, and then we can obviously work our way up to where you are now and what Childfree Wealth is along the way.
That sounds good.
So how did this all start? Where did this journey start for you?
So I'm one of those weird people that had a other career before I came to finance. My background, my PhD is in adult learning. I come out of the coaching world. Okay. So, life coaching, financial coaching, executive coaching, all that fun stuff. And in the coaching world, the honest truth is people are more willing to pay for financial coaching than life coaching, executive coaching. I mean, I'm just being real on it. Yeah. It just is what it is. But then once you're a financial coach, you're like, well, I want to do more. I want to do investments. And there's a whole bunch of things. So I went to become a certified financial planner. And through that process, one of the interesting things I found was there's never once a mention in the CFP literature about being child-free. When I say child-free, we mean people who don't have kids, aren't planning on kids. Everything in finance is like pre-kids, post-kids.
Yeah.
There's no opt-out. And my wife and I are child-free and kind of set me on this path, Yeah, I'm a PhD, so I'm a researcher by nature, so I want to dive in, look and figure this out. And my question I really started asking was, how weird are we? Now, we are both PhDs. We're weird by nature. Our dinner conversation is probably different than most, but by being child-free, how weird are we? And come to find out, somewhere around 25% of the U.S. are child-free or permanently childless, and it changes pretty much everything about the life and financial plan.
Absolutely.
And it's not in the literature. It's ignored. And to me, it's that surprise when you're like, wait, 25% of the US and there's never a mention of it? It just seems like there's something missing. And I don't know. I decided to dive in, but hopefully at some point I'll figure out what the missing part is. Either people didn't want to do it or just, as a group, nobody wanted to work with. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure part of it, and this is, me speaking as someone, I graduated from college about 5 or 6 years ago. I forget exactly, but my generation seems to be much more open about the idea of not having children, that not being the standard, so to say, that not being the expected. Whereas, from speaking to my parents or other people around their age, that wasn't the norm for sure. As they were going through their lives, it was always kind of expected, and it was always, oh, well, when is that happening? Not, is it going to happen? Whereas nowadays, at least people in my generation are much more likely to ask is rather than when.
Yeah, and we talk about it as the standard life plan or standard life script versus picking your own.
Yeah.
And the standard life plan is the one that says you go to school, you get married, you have kids, you buy a house, you work 25 years, you retire, pass on the money to generation. Cool. That's been the way for long time.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much ever. And I think you're right. I think there is a generational shift. I actually did some research for my book, and I started asking the question about why do people choose to be child free? Not everybody's a choice. Sometimes it's not by choice. There's to be more childless population. But it was interesting. Well, a third of people were like, yep, just never really wanted to have kids. But then there were some interesting combos because most people had more one reason, like finances and freedom and environmental and politics and medical and trauma. And I'm like, wow, like it was a very well thought out thing, but it's still kind of like hush hush and judged. I mean, I say this as somebody who lives in Mississippi in a post-Roe world. And I will tell you that it's not nice down here. If you want to say you're working with child-free folks, I recently sold my house and I actually had to take down all the stuff that's behind me because I was worried people were going to vandalize it or, whatever, judge it. And I don't think that's a crazy thought. I mean, right now, reproductive rights is a big issue.
Yeah.
Your generation is much more, on it. I'm Gen X and they're pretty much there, but the judgments and the thing, I collect now people that are praying for my soul and other things on social media just because I serve child-free people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really can't imagine the type of conversations that you've probably had just trying to explain, what it is that you do for a living. I mean, you've had a lot of fun ones.
Let me tell you a fun one. So August 1st was International Child-Free Day. And most people don't even know that exists. So
I did not before right now.
Yep. It was the 50th time, let's call it. It's not technically an anniversary. First started off as Non-Parents Day. And to celebrate, we sponsored a billboard in Times Square. And it just said, hey, today's International Child-Free Day, telling what it's like to be child-free. And we featured 5 people talking about their life and what it's like to be child-free. And it was shared on social media. It was great. And then somebody posted, she's like, oh, I was on this billboard. This is me. And somebody's like, oh, well, you're part of a global PSYOP operation to convince people to not have kids and the, global. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And literally the post was like, I get to travel because I'm child free. It's like,
yeah.
I guess that makes me the global PSYOP convincing her. I don't know.
You might be. In which case, this will be a very exciting podcast.
I was going to say, give me the, if you're going to give me the credit, I might as well get the money to go with it. If I'm going to control the whole global, economy, cool.
Yeah. I mean, good for you, honestly. I mean, that's pretty exciting. First time I'm talking to someone that's controlling an entire global economy. So that's good, It
was the first time I'd heard of it too. So I didn't know, hey, I got promoted, I guess.
But yeah, I mean, I think what you touched upon there with that person in particular, having the ability to travel and I think that is the reality for a lot of people is I'm assuming, choosing to be child free. Obviously, with some people, it's not necessarily a choice. But choosing often is just about living your life the way you want to and not having to, work around the idea of having a child, both financially and, plans and whatnot.
Yeah, the way we say it is living a life of child-free wealth means you have time, money, and freedom to do what you enjoy. Now, the one kind of clarification there is being child-free doesn't automatically make you rich. So, you choose to be child-free, there's no check that comes flying down and, deposits into your account. What happens though, is you get to live a different life. I'm not saying better or worse, just different. And the data is interesting. The census looked at this and said, in adults over 55, who has the highest net worth? And they found that single childless women have the highest net worth by $2,000, not enough to matter.
Yeah.
And part of that is because or at least in my opinion, child-free folks don't really care about passing on money to the next generation. They're embracing more like a die with zero approach.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, you actually have to bring your net worth down, which is not what financial planning is about.
Yeah.
You have to actually spend your money, enjoy it. And there's all these assumptions that are in life and financial planning that just don't fit child-free folks.
Yeah, and I think something that you said there is really important to note as well is, it doesn't automatically assume that you're rich. It doesn't automatically make you happier. There's plenty of people, childless, that it's not a choice and it's just their reality. And there's plenty of people that what they want in life is to have children. I mean, that's more typically the norm, probably just judging by those numbers. And that's what, that's what they see as a fulfilling life. That's what makes them happy. I just think it's probably important to say that in case. But as I'm sure you probably know, this doesn't automatically make you happier or make you, more successful or whatever. It's all based on the individual.
Well, actually, I'm going to challenge you a little here. So for my book, I had done a bunch of interviews and surveys. I surveyed about just shy of 300 child-free folks. And I did an open-ended question. Are you happy with your life? Just to see. 94% said yes.
Interesting.
That is way off the charts.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did that survey just at the end of the COVID time. So we coming out of a rough time and still happy with your life. Now, the way I look at it is it's not necessarily going to make you rich, but it may make you happy. And, for those people that are childless, not by choice, often the way I look at it is they have to grieve the life they thought they were going to live before they can move on to a child-free life. And it's not a judgment, it's a different plan than you had planned. But what happens is the child-free folks, the people that have chosen it, are going, hey, I put a lot of thought and effort into this. I mean, you want to talk about people that put thought into having kids. I mean, they're thinking a lot about it more than some.
Yeah.
And they put all this thought into it and said, okay, I want to live a different life. I'm going to live my best life. Now, how do I do that? And happiness goes with it. I mean, we get judged often. People are like, oh, you'll regret it. Data does not back that up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is like, yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. It definitely is. And I guess what I was trying to say was more so that the typical norm is people assume having children will give them fulfillment. Like that, like you said, like 25% of people are childless or child-free. Like that's more of what I was saying when I say typically is just the majority according to the statistics. But I would like to get into a little bit about what makes it different from a planning perspective. Like what are the challenges? What are the differences? I'm sure there are a lot of them just based on what you've already said, but could we dive a little deeper into the specifics a little bit?
Absolutely. So I like to start at the end and work my way backwards. So the way I say it is most child-free folks are going to embrace a die with zero approach. They want to have, my nephews can get whatever's left over, but if they get 10,000 or 100,000, I'm fine with that. If they get $1 million, I messed up. I should have given that away, lived with it. I should have done something in my life with it. So you say, okay, I don't want to pass on next generation. The next step is, interestingly enough, large percentage, probably 90% of the people I've worked with don't really want to retire. And in the financial planning, everything is pre-retiree, retiree. Yeah. What about non-retirees, where instead of embracing FIRE and retiring early, they're embracing what we call FILE, financial independence, live early. If FIRE is an on-off switch for work, FILE is a dimmer switch of like the right work at the right time across your life. And it completely changes all of your finances. Then we kind of keep going back. And what you find is that if you're going to plan as a child-free person, you actually have to plan your life first, then your finances. To the point where if somebody comes out to me and goes, hey, when can I retire? I'll usually follow the question, well, do you want to retire? They go, no. Well, then why are you asking me that question? And we get stuck in, but all the standard financial literature says you got to retire, you got to buy a house, buy a house is a choice for a child-free person, not a requirement. Retirement's a choice, not a requirement. When you have so many differences, it makes a whole different plan. If you go the standard financial planning process for people, parents, all the financial plans are pretty much the same. Numbers are different.
Yeah.
We plan for college and this and an empty nest and it's just the numbers change. Child-free folks, I got people that'll change their plans 3 times in a year. They're like, oh, I'm going to move. I'm going to do a new job. I'm going to go back to school. And that's normal. I got people that don't even own a house. They live, the editor for my next book, her and her dog lived for a month in different VRBOs or Airbnbs and doesn't have a house. And I don't know what state she's in at any time. Like, that's just normal. And that's part of living in this child-free life that completely changes all the assumptions. Plus, even the basics, okay? So the safe withdrawal rate assumes you want to keep your principal. Well, if you're trying to die at the zero, it doesn't work. If you're doing Monte Carlo simulations, all that assumes you want to keep you don't want to hit zero. Well, that's wrong. Life insurance. Life insurance is there for people that need your salary. They don't. We don't need life insurance. We need disability insurance. It goes on and on and on. And it's all these things that add up. And it's not just like, boom, pull kids out of the picture and just keep doing the standard plan. No, it's make something that matches the person.
No, that's incredible. I mean, I like the idea of starting from the end, going forward, or going backwards, I guess, because I think you're correct. Like with children, you have to start at the beginning and go, okay, how am I, do I want them to go to a private high school that costs money? Then it's college, then it's, whatever, there's retirement. And obviously you don't need to be literally retired to take money out of your retirement account, so to say. So they still serve a purpose, but like you said, you just have to look at it differently because you probably are taking more out because you don't need a ton left over at the end, if any.
So let's do a simple one. People often reach out and go, "Well, should I do a Roth conversion?" Well, if you're not going to use all your money, that's a different answer. But if you're not going to pass on another generation, paying the taxes now may or may not make sense. A Roth conversion makes more sense when you're passing on another generation that gets it tax-free. 1031 exchange, same thing, makes more sense when you pay. It changes even tax decisions that you wouldn't think about.
And I guess that's why it's probably important to be dealing with someone that specializes in living that way and financially planning that way, because you have thought about all these different scenarios and the way that you have to change your thought process and the planning process.
Yeah, I mean, if you go online and you Google financial planning, financial advice, financial education, whatever, just about all of it, I mean, 99% plus assumes you're going to have kids. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to, we actually have a course for that and we can help people through it. But, if you're going to stick to the standard advice, it doesn't fit. So use a base example. So you got the Dave Ramsey 7 baby steps. All built into there are all assumptions about having kids, buying a house, saving for college. We actually just launched a program we call the 8 no baby steps. What happens if you take that all out and you're doing it a different way? And what happens is the basics, getting out of debt, that's always good. That's just chicken soup for the soul. But then once you get out of debt and you have an emergency fund, your options are endless. And that's where, if you're going on the internet and just randomly looking for financial advice, you're actually going to get financial advice that doesn't fit you. And that could be an issue.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a massive issue. Just even if you are planning on having children, any type of financial advice that doesn't fit you is a problem. But especially when it just so drastically changes basically every decision that you have to make along the way. I did want to ask you a little bit more about I believe it was file versus fire. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could dive into those a little bit more, because I like that. That was intriguing.
All right, Michael, I'm going to ask you a couple questions now. I should have warned you, but
Nope, go for it.
You're doing this podcast. You're doing a lot of things. You got a lot of things moving. Do you really see yourself shutting off work completely and sitting on a beach?
No, never.
Cool. Then why are you planning for retirement?
Because I would like to work less, or I would like to work any amount that I want, basically.
Okay. So that's where file comes in. So rather than investing in the stock market, the whatever you want to do, you start investing in yourself. So I've got people that can turn that dimmer switch down and find the job that they like, they enjoy to do throughout your life. You said, hey, I want to work less. Well, here's the thing. If we took retirement out of the financial picture, you actually probably could work less now because you're not saving for retirement. I'm just playing this out.
Okay.
Then we add die with zero with it, and all of a sudden you can do an entire different financial plan. I'll give you an example. There's a couple I worked with. There's a popular term, DINKs, dual income, no kids. That's kind of where they came from. And she was working a state job, nice, stable job, enjoyed it, with a pension, kind of like bored out of her mind. It's a state job. I mean, come on, let's be real. That's not something to get you excited. She decided to take a sabbatical, ended up for NaNoWriMo writing a first novel, and now she's publishing books and trying to work that path. Now, I'll tell you, as an author, there's only two choices. You either make no money or a lot of money. There's nowhere in between. But here's the thing. She's happier than ever.
Yeah.
You said yourself, hey, I'd like to cut back and make work optional. Cody Garrett from Measure Twice Planner says it this way. He calls FIRE, financial independence, recreational employment, which that's kind of getting closer to where FILE is.
Yeah.
But like I argue, and this is, I know, minutia, but in the FIRE community, talk about barista FIRE. I'm going to have just a basic job and retire. Technically, you can't have a job and retire.
Yeah.
Retirement means no work.
Yeah. I only laugh because I had an uncle. He passed away a couple years ago, but he was working until the day he died, even though he had been retired for 15 some years. He considered retirement, cutting back to like 20 hours a week. My other uncle opened a brewery after he retired and began working 90 hours a week. So very prevalent in my life is that conversation. And I find it very entertaining whenever it's brought up.
So we'll call those encore careers.
Yeah.
That is actually the technical term on that. But here's the thing. Both of them could have made different choices throughout their life and maybe opened the brewery earlier if they realized retirement wasn't their plan. So, people talk about the FIRE number. I got to get, X times my my expenses in my net worth. Well, what happens if the goal is not to stop work? So we model it completely different and assume you're going to have some income across your life, maybe enough to cover healthcare and all the other stuff. You can stop earning money now. And with child-free folks, there's this weird point that hits that says every dollar you earn after a certain point in life is going to your estate, which you don't care about. So you're essentially working for the government, I guess, so they can take their 40%, depending on how much it is or whatever. But you're giving it off, at some point I'm going to work for my nephews. That is not a good answer. Yeah. I need to cut out work before that. And that's the difference between FILE and FIRE. It's that different approach of, it's kind of a combo between a YOLO and retirement planning, and kind of going, I'm going to live my best life, enjoy it, but within boundaries. We usually say guardrails and work through a process. But my goal is not to retire.
Yeah.
If my goal is not to retire, it changes all the financial planning before that.
Now, So I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. There is still some value in having these retirement accounts. You just have to treat them differently. You have to go in with a different goal, because having money where you can work less and it still provides you an income, that's still valuable, right?
So the retirement accounts are less the point, and it's more how you're investing your money and your time. So the book Dive by Zero talks about the combination between time, money, and health, and how do you spend that for your experience and throughout your life. So let's look at it this way. If instead, we're going to use your example since you're going to follow your uncle's path and never quit work. If instead of putting money into your retirement, you invested it into you and what you enjoy, would that be a better return on investment? I joke about it, but I call it Marie Kondoing your life. Do what you enjoy, get rid of the stuff you don't. And I'm willing to bet there's some things you would change in your life right now that you could invest in yourself and maybe get a return on the happiness scale, but it's not the same in the stock market or retirement accounts, whatever investment. Yeah,
you're probably right. But then how do you approach it knowing that this is actually, I'm sorry if I'm, I'm not talking necessarily as much as I normally do. Sorry to the listeners. I'm really trying to wrap my head around it and understand, the approach. Because at this point, it's not even necessarily a child-free conversation. It's just, it is two separate conversations that kind of, tend to meet in the middle somewhere, depending on who you are and the way you're approaching life. But even if I'm doing things that maybe don't earn me money at the end of my life, things that a very small income at most, but in reality, maybe I'm just kind of doing what I enjoy for 40 hours a week. How do you approach balancing investing in yourself now and investing in your future?
So the first thing is, remember, the future is not given.
Of course.
So let's start with that. I, in general, when people want to truly embrace Die with Zero, we put a plan for long-term care, either money aside or insurance for long-term care, put off Social Security to 70 and a little cash cushion. So we put that money at the send just to go like, when I physically can't do it, world's coming to an end, that's where my money is. Then we optimize their life in the middle. So I've actually found I spend more time talking to my clients about spending money than saving money. And let me use a dumb example of this. Quite a few of my clients have what I call the blueberry problem. They have been scrimping and saving so much that they buy the frozen blueberries that are $1 cheaper than the fresh blueberries. And I look at them like, just buy the damn blueberries. You're fine. They taste better. You enjoy them. The dollar is not going to impact your retirement at the end.
Yeah.
Now, if retirement is not your goal, we can then run your money out and go, well, here's the minimum you need to cover your expenses, your life, all the other things. And Michael, I'm willing to bet, I don't know your numbers, but just go with me for a second. If you stopped investing right now, you'd have more than enough money at the end.
There's a possibility. Probably not, honestly, given my personal situation, but it's probably would be better than I thought it would be. Then I would expect it to be, maybe, is a good way to say it.
I'm willing to bet it's closer than you think it is, because I mean, you're younger and you got enough time for it to compound. I mean, let's just be real on that.
True.
All right. If you're in your 30s, you're out of debt and you have a little bit of money, you're set. Like as long as you don't do anything stupid, you could be okay. But then people go, well, but I need to work this job because I'm making a lot of money. I get a lot of people making 6 figures. I can't quit this job. I'm like, but you're unhappy. My co-host for my podcast, Spring, she's also my paraplanner. She actually has a chart next to her of how many times I tell people to quit their jobs. Because I'm like, look, you're getting paid $150,000 a year. You hate your job, quit it.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but that'll slow down my retirement. I'm like, so you're telling me you're willing to be miserable for the next 20 years for that paycheck? And they'll always go, well, that's not what I said. And I'm like, no, that is what you just said. But we get so stuck in the hamster wheel or the hedonic treadmill, and we have to save for retirement. We have to, maybe I'll get retirement earlier. And then we get there, and it's like the dog that caught the car. You're like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And my thing is, no, enjoy your life. You spend a third of your time at work. If you hate what you're doing, quit the job, go be a librarian, which is what you always want to do. You get paid a third of the money, but you'll be happier. Make your expenses fit.
No, I think that's a very, that I can agree. I understand. I agree with 1,000%, because it does really come down to, a fourth of your life, maybe, if you're lucky, is when you're retired. And if you're miserable for 2/4 of it, for a half of it, just to, be able to retire happily, that math doesn't add up. I mean, that's the simplest math that we've talked about, and it doesn't add up.
And you're a great example. Your family nobody in your family is a good example so far of retirement.
No.
Yeah. And by the way, I'll freely admit I'm not great at embracing FILE myself, because my parents always said, whatever you do, be the best at it. And that is a conflict with FILE and finding a balance. And I'm freely admitting I'm working on it. I had somebody for my book. He's the best example. He retired in his 30s, FIRE, did well, bored out of his mind, went back, opened up a marketing company. And here's his rules: no more than 25 hours a week, never before 10, and never on Fridays. I can do that. And by the way, he works at whatever beach he wants to take his computer to. Him, his wife, and his dog were going to Palm Springs to do the business. I'm like, that's the FIRE lifestyle.
Yeah.
And he uses the money for himself and for what he enjoys and what matters, versus, oh yeah, I just want to retire.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a large part of it. I mean, it goes back to that, the child conversation of, it's sort of just what was, as you're growing up, that's what you learn. That's what you're taught. That's what you expect to happen. It's you retire at 65 or whatever. And then I guess you just learn to like golf and play that a lot.
And the fun part is that's based on a whole lot of assumptions that don't fit anymore.
Yeah.
That was back when somebody with, a family with one income could afford a house.
Yeah.
You could work 25 years, get a pension, and go off into the sunset.
Yeah.
That is not the case now. I'm just going to call it that. Like it's
I agree.
So if that's the case, why are we still following a financial plan from 100 years ago?
It's a good question. So it's a very good question that people probably don't ask a lot. And again, I just will say this. That does work for some people. For some people, that's exactly what they want their retirement to be. But I think it goes back to your point of you start at the end and you work backward and you figure out, what do I want it to be? How do I get there?
Yeah. I mean, I had somebody else for my book I interviewed. He's a FIRE guy, 100%. And he actually we call him Portraits of Childfree Wealth. And his portrait was called A Portrait of Successful Laziness. He was the classic, lazy guy job, lazy girl job. He just did enough to get through, made enough money. He's retiring at 45 and he's just going to do gaming for a living. His only worry is that his friends still have to work. Okay, cool. That works for him.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that's the same for everybody.
Yeah.
I think what happens is, the reason why I say start with your life first, then your finances, then your taxes, is you'll make different decisions. You'll invest in yourself, your happiness, rather than just putting zeros onto the board and running the net worth up.
Yeah. Wow. I have to be honest. You've just given me a lot to think about. I knew this conversation would be interesting. I didn't necessarily expect it to go like this, and I mean that in a positive way. I feel like I could probably just sit here and listen to you talk for the next 5 hours and just keep peppering you with questions. Unfortunately, we are getting to the end of the episode. And before I ask you to plug yourself, tell the listeners where they can find you, how to reach out to you. I do have one question for you that I'm very excited to hear your answer for. I ask this to everyone that comes on, and it's simply, what does financial freedom mean to you?
So I'm one of those kind of people. I go back to the old school. It used to be called FU money, like where you have enough money, you could do what you want.
Yep.
My wife and I are in that part. We get to do what we want. We embrace something we call the garden and the rose. One's growing, one's providing support. We were able to just move 1,200 miles for her job, just pick up the dogs and go. And that's a freedom that comes with having no debt, having enough money, getting through. And I grew up broke. And I'll tell you, when you grew up broke and you're worried about rent and ramen, and you eventually get to a point where you're like, we're okay. We can do it. We're fine. We can change jobs. We can change states. We can change lives. That flexibility, that financial independence, that FU money of being able to tell people, this situation, no good, I'm out. That is just freeing to a point that you don't know until you get there.
I can't possibly imagine the feeling. And I believe you when you say that there's nothing quite like it. So very well said.
And my favorite part is you probably have a list of the people you'd like to tell what to do with it. But
I think everyone has that list, not exclusive to just me.
I have clients that I'm like, I know you're going to tell your boss what to do with their job at some point. You call me the day before that, please, so we can make a plan. But like you're good. We just want to make sure you have a healthcare plan and a few other things on the way out.
You can plan ahead a little bit in that case. Yeah, probably for the best. But Jay, please tell the listeners how they can get in contact with you, where they can find you, where they can learn more about what you're doing.
Yeah, so childfreewealth.com is the website. You can actually take our new course, the 8 No Baby Steps, at childfreewealth.com/steps for free. Childfree Wealth on all social media except for Twitter. We got off there because, childless people aren't supposed to have a vote, according to the new king there. So anywhere else, you can find us.
Thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I've got a lot to think about. I learned a lot today. I'm excited to just even listen back to this episode, and as well as, do some more reading and listening to stuff that you're doing. And of course, all of the things that Jay just said, they can be found in the links in the description. So Jay, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate you digging in and willing to even talk about your finances.
Oh, absolutely. And as always, thank you for listening to The Road to Financial Freedom. If you enjoyed this show, please support the podcast by remembering to rate, review, and subscribe. You can keep up to date with us on Facebook or Instagram at Road to Financial Freedom Podcast. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. If you like what you're hearing on The Road to Financial Freedom and want to learn more about self-directed IRAs and 401ks, click the link in the description to download a free toolkit with everything you need to get started.